Lejla, please tell my story. I met my boyfriend when I was 25. I had never been in a serious relationship before as I was always too busy focusing on my studies. By the age of 24, I'd already completed a master's degree in math. My education and my career was top priority for the whole of my early life, so I had no idea what it was like to be loved by a man until I met him. On my 25th birthday, on a night out, he so innocently asked me if he could buy me a drink. I thought he was the most good-looking man I'd ever seen, so I said yes, and we ended up talking all night. Things moved quite quickly after that, but I was so new to the whole love thing that I just assumed that this was how it was supposed to be. I thought his eagerness to move fast meant he really loved me as much as I loved him. I felt so lucky. So we moved in together. The first 2 years were blissful. I would come home to dinner and wine, and sometimes he would take me on spontaneous date nights, and they were always romantic. I really couldn't believe it. I used to think to myself, how is this possible? How am I so lucky to find the love of my life this quickly? Surely this is all too good to be true. That was until he got a new job in the city, very well paid. He started staying out late with his work colleagues, and he would use his excuse of saying that they all needed to entertain their clients. But before long, I found traces of drugs in his work clothes. I decided to confront him about it, and he didn't deny it. Instead, he made it seem like it was a really normal thing for him to do now, he said. It's part and parcel of entertaining clients in this industry. It's just something I have to do every now and then. The late nights, the drugs, the alcohol. It all became a regular occurrence, and before I knew it, his whole character changed. He seemed more power hungry now, as if nothing was ever good enough unless it was 100% done his way. Everything was about him and his needs. His old personality would come out only when he was sober, and I hung on to this desperately, thinking, surely his behaviour will settle down. The drugs and alcohol will stop, and I will get my man back. And the best way I can describe him was like Jekyll and Hyde. He was great when he was sober. He wouldn't even hurt a fly. He was spiritual, loving, caring, supportive, my best friend. He didn't have a single enemy in this world, and everybody loved him. But as the addiction took over, it became all he cared about, and I was delusional, thinking that I could ever get him back. So I began walking on eggshells, not wanting to trigger him into a drinking frenzy, feeling grateful for any time that we spent together that didn't include him being drunk, aggressive, controlling, or verbally abusive. The first time he was ever violent happened so fast it left me confused, especially as he was immediately apologetic. He even cried and begged me to leave him for what he had done. I thought to myself, of course I'm not going to leave. I know this isn't who he really is. It's a one-off. Surely it's never going to happen again. But I was wrong. So wrong. The violence only continued and gradually got worse. Once, he hit me so hard with a belt buckle that it split my head open from the back of my ear all the way down to my neck. That was a really long night I spent in A&E. But I thought to myself, this was love. I didn't know any different. I thought our relationship was passionate. I thought it was my responsibility to fix him, to change him. If I truly loved him, I would stay and work through the hard times. After all, no relationship is perfect, I told myself. If only I hadn't provoked him. If only I had got out of his way. I thought maybe I was the one who needed to change. And if I'm totally honest with you, I can say that I became addicted to the high that I felt after every incident when he would beg me for forgiveness, because it felt like this was the only time that I ever got a glimmer of the man that I once met. It's hard for me to remember now the details of every incident because I didn't even once contemplate leaving. As a result, I always made myself forget what had happened. That was until the final incident that nearly cost me my life. He had eventually promised to go to rehab and changed. He followed through with the drugs and alcohol program. He got sober. The nights out with work stopped, and it seemed as though he was back. So we decided to move to a new home for a fresh start. And now that we were more financially secure, we managed to buy a big house in the suburbs. I was floating on cloud nine. All those years I'd put up with abuse hadn't been wasted. We were going to have our happily ever after. I was sure of it. Our new home was beautiful. It was massive. It even had one of those stairways that you see in the movies. You know, the big ones that wind up as soon as you enter the door. This was going to be the stairway that would eventually almost lead me to my death. His sobriety lasted 9 months before he started slipping back into his old ways. One night, he didn't return home at all. I was in such a panic. His phone was off and I had no idea where he was. So I started ringing around our friends frantically, asking if they'd seen or heard from him. But they didn't know anything. And this was the first time they'd ever heard me mention anything about drugs and violence, and that I was worried that he may be laying somewhere dying from an overdose. My boyfriend had already returned home though. He'd been listening to me making the phone calls and finally admitting to our friends the truth. He appeared in the bedroom, slowly walking towards me. I was relieved and angry at the same time to see him. But he looked different. He had zero facial expressions as he asked me why I'd been telling everyone about his addiction. Almost as if he was possessed. Everything about him was cold, emotionless. He didn't even give me a chance to explain how worried I had been as he put his hands around my neck and began to suffocate me. He slammed me down onto the bed with my face into the pillow whilst he sat on my back, making sure that I couldn't get up out of his grip. I know I passed out for a minute or so because when I came round, I was dizzy and my vision was blurry. But he was just standing there, watching me. He looked completely lifeless and empty. There was absolutely no reasoning with him. I screamed in an effort to get him to come back to reality, to see what he was doing to me. But it made no difference whatsoever. He charged towards the bed, grabbed me with so much force that he pulled off all the bed sheets along with me. I was petrified. I had no idea what he was planning to do until he walked out onto the hallway. When we were at the edge of the stairway, I thought he was going to push me down the stairs. I wish he had done, because at least that way I would have been able to break my fall somehow. Instead, with absolutely no hesitation whatsoever, he threw me over the banister. I can't remember exactly how high the top of the stairs were, but it felt like the fall was never ending. I didn't even fall onto the floor. I ended up falling at the bottom of the banister on my back, and I immediately felt the pain. I knew something was broken. I just didn't know what. There was no way I could move, but I'd never imagined that falling with so much force that my back broke as soon as I'd hit the bottom of the banister. And I really wish I'd passed out, but I didn't lose consciousness once. I felt every minute of the excruciating pain, all the way up until I was given morphine in hospital. And the thing is, how I ended up in hospital that morning and the prison sentence that my boyfriend received, my rehabilitation process, it's all so relevant to my story now. And here's why. I want to tell you that as soon as a man loses his temper enough to put his hands on you and you stay, it becomes easier and easier each time they hit you again. Leave now. Run as fast as you can. The man you once knew is not coming back. Take him for what he presents to you. The mental abuse, the violence. That's the real him, not the illusion that you have of him in your head. Please wake up and accept this now before you end up like me, or worse, dead. I know love can make you feel trapped, but remember, love does not hurt you. It does not control you. It does not literally break your back. So please, ladies, don't ignore red flags. Please get help and get out. Please don't stay and try and fix your abuser like I did.